status in the marine environment. Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Lorna McKellar. I'm based at Bangor University with my main supervisor, which is Jan Hidding. But I'm also working in collaboration with Plymouth and Exeter universities, as well as my partner organizations, which are ICES, JNCC, and NERIS. And I'm part of the first SMR CDT cohort. And so, yeah, this is my PhD, setting thresholds for good status in marine ecosystem management. And so today I'm going to start off by explaining what exactly a threshold is in the context of marine management, how they're set, what methods are used, and importantly, how and why I'm going to be evaluating those methods. And then I'm just going to touch on some of the next steps of the project as well. I'm in my first year, so it's still got a bit of a way to go. But first of all, what is a threshold? Well, in the context of marine management, it's a value which distinguishes between good and bad ecosystem states. And it's based off of indicators, which are kind of the proxy measures we're using to look at that particular ecosystem condition that we're interested in. And just to visualize this a bit more, we've got the kind of ecosystem state on the y-axis there, so as measured through that indicator over time. And then we'll set the threshold at a particular value of that indicator. And then as that kind of indicator is continually measured over time, if that value sits above the threshold, we can consider it to be in a good state and below in a bad state. Just to really hone in on this, I've got a couple of examples of real-world thresholds. So this indicator here is the large fish index, which essentially looks at the proportion of fish over a particular length within an area. So here it's 50 centimeters, I think. And the threshold here you can see is that black dotted line. So as this indicator is calculated annually over time, if it sits above that threshold, it's considered to be in a good state and below in a bad state. And then just another quick example, this is looking at the total nitrogen in rivers. And again, the threshold here, that red dotted line set at 2.5. And as that nitrogen is measured in different areas over time, if it sits above that threshold, it can be considered to be in a good state and below in a bad state. So thresholds are really important for assessing the status of marine ecosystems, what condition they're in. And that's particularly important because the EU's Marine Strategy Framework Directive and the UK's Marine Strategy have said that they're going to aim to achieve good environmental status across these huge marine areas by 2030. And that obviously means that we need to not only assess the current status of these different areas, but we need to know and define what good status is as well. But there's just currently not enough thresholds available to carry out these assessments and to define good environmental status. So that's where my project's coming in and looking to define a framework moving forward for setting these thresholds for good status. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go over some of the methods that are being used to set them. And as I kind of started this project and was going through some of the policy and the literature, what I found that there wasn't really a clear, consistent framework being used across different areas. And often the method that was actually chosen was driven by the amount of data that was available. So there was kind of quantitative methods being used, but qualitative methods as well. And I'm hoping that my project's going to look at both of these different methods. But today I'm going to focus on the quantitative ones because that's where I'm starting out at. So there's 8 different quantitative methods I found so far. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but I just wanted to touch upon 2 of them just to show you kind of the differences between them and perhaps the differences in the thresholds they're producing as well. So the first one is called tipping points, and that requires data on the kind of ecosystem state, the condition, and the pressure as well, and the relationship between those 2 variables. And it essentially says that there's this point in this relationship where just a small increase in pressure will cause a disproportionately large decline in the ecosystem state. So that tipping point there is where this method says to set the threshold, and then we know that any value above that can be representative of a good state. The second method is quite different, called natural variation. And what this essentially looks to do is identify what the range of a natural variability of an indicator would be if it was in a condition completely kind of free of human pressures, undisturbed, unimpacted. What would its natural variability be? And then set the threshold at the lower percentile of that variability and say, well, any value below this is not representative of a good state, is not representative of the natural variability of that indicator in a good undisturbed condition. And then just take that threshold and kind of impose that on the current indicator data and say, well, as it's monitored over time, any value above that threshold can be considered to be representative of a good state. So you can see there's quite a few differences just in these two methods alone, and then across the 8 different methods I have. I wanted to try and evaluate the kind of appropriateness for these methods for setting thresholds for good status. And in order to do that, I needed to look at the statistical robustness of each of them, how ecologically meaningful they were in relation to good environmental status, and then also how well do they incorporate some of those societal factors as well, which are really important for setting thresholds. And whilst it was slightly easier to kind of infer the ecological meaningfulness and some of the social and economic factors, it was quite difficult to look at the make any kind of conclusions around the statistical robustness, because a lot of these methods were not fully conceptualized, which is where my project is starting off at. And it kind of, some of these questions kept coming up was, does the type of pressure state relationship impact what thresholds ultimately produce? How noisy the data is, does that have an influence on the threshold? And just how different are these different thresholds across the methods that they're producing? And so then in order to answer some of these questions, I needed to model these different methods, generate my own data and kind of feed that in, and then see what thresholds are ultimately produced. So I'm starting off by generating 3 different types of pressure state relationship: linear, concave, and convex, and then varying the noisiness of that data as well to see how much of an influence that has on the threshold that's produced. And then compare across these different methods the differences in their thresholds, and hopefully that will give a much more in-depth evaluation of the statistical robustness, and that will then inform what method should be kind of used moving forward when setting thresholds. So some of the next steps of the project, as I mentioned, the qualitative methods are really important here. And what I'm hoping to do is do a similar thing with kind of stakeholder elicitation. So getting experts and stakeholders together in a room and understanding how I can get some of that qualitative data and kind of bring that into some quantitative threshold values, and then do the similar thing for trade-offs as well. And then I'm also working within my partner organizations, JNCC, ICES, and NIRAS, in order to really understand where are some of the gaps and the challenges around this research area at the moment, and how can I ensure that my findings are really going to be applicable in order to answer some of those questions and fill some of those gaps. So just a really quick summary of the project, of what I've spoken about today. Thresholds are key for assessing ecosystems and achieving good environmental status objectives. But at the moment, there's not enough thresholds in order to carry out this assessment. And there's just not a synthesis of the different methods. So we just don't know what the differences and the strengths and weaknesses of them are. So my project is going to produce a framework for setting these thresholds for good status. Thank you. And I just want to give a big thanks to my many supervisors and the SMR CDT for this project as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorna. I've got a few questions written down already, so we'll later.